Pokemon. A franchise most people should know by now. It shouldn't even need an introduction. It's had such a huge impact on society since so many people have cherished the various titles that have been released throughout the years. You'd have to be living under a rock to not know anything about this series. And despite the popularity that these games receive, not many people have heard of the spin-off series that I'm going to be discussing today. And that series is Pokémon Mystery Dungeon. The Mystery Dungeon games changed the way that Pokemon is meant to be played. Unlike the main games where you play as a human who goes on a journey to catch and train Pokemon under your wing in order to become the champion of the region, these games turn that idea on its head and have you become the Pokemon instead. The main premise of this series is that you have been turned into a Pokemon for an unknown reason, and you progress through the story trying to figure out why. You have no memory of your past, and the only thing you can recall is your name. You meet a Pokemon who becomes your partner, and the two of you go on a huge journey in order to discover why you have been transported to this world, and most importantly, why you have been transformed into a Pokemon. The Mystery Dungeon games generally revolve around similar plots, but the stories are different for each game. What I like about these games is that they don't feel repetitive to me. They feel like a brand new experience that I can play through every time that I pick up one of these games. It's what makes this series really unique to me, and is also why I really fell in love with it. However, there is one game that I am a fan of the most, and is the one that I'm going to be talking about today. That game is Pokémon Mystery Dungeon: Explorers of Sky. You may or may not have heard of it, but this is one of the most well-received games in the Mystery Dungeon series. It has a really unique style of gameplay along with fantastic music choices and lovable characters. Unlike the mainline Pokemon titles, these games focus more on the story, as it's one of the more driving forces towards game progression. I was originally hesitant when I first picked up the game, but my whole mindset changed as I kept playing and playing. I was drawn back to the game multiple times because I felt compelled to keep playing until I was finished. And eventually I did. I beat the game. The credits rolled, the farewell music played, and it said the end. But it didn't sit right with me. I wanted more. More gameplay, more story, more interactions with the characters. I wanted more. So I went back to the game, and I discovered that there was a post-game, which was just as long and just as good as the main story. It felt like a brand new experience within the same game. I had a reason to get drawn back to playing the game again. And at that moment, I realized that this was the point where I had fallen in love with the game. This wasn't out of obligation either. No one had convinced me to play the game except for myself. And it was one of the best decisions of my life. Although I had my fair share of games that I also enjoyed, none of them seemed to fit to the degree that Pokémon Mystery Dungeon: Explorers of Time, Darkness, and Sky set for me. But I can't put this game on a pedestal without explaining why. That's why I'm going to summarize the game as best as I can and give my opinion on certain parts of it. I will be splitting the summary into two parts, a spoiler and a spoiler-free section, as I want to give you the option to either go into the game blind or to know what to expect when you play the game. There will be a timestamp at the spoiler section so you can skip it if you want to, but without further ado, let's move on to the summary. I grew up around the time when the most recent Pokemon games to release were Diamond and Pearl, and these games blew up as soon as they were accessible to the public. I've had so many people tell me that these games brought them countless memories and that they immediately fell in love with the game upon playing it. And I will admit, I am one of these people. Generation 4 has really good starters and really good music too, but I digress. Now this part may be pretty confusing to listen to, so I'll provide a visual for you to look at while I explain this part. So there were two Explorers games that were released around the time that Diamond and Pearl dropped, that being Explorers of Time and Explorers of Darkness, which are also in the same generation as Diamond and Pearl. Explorers of Sky, however, is essentially a remake of Time and Darkness, with some extra details added in to not just make it an exact copy. These features, however, are really nice additions to the game. Not only do they add new things such as brand new dungeons, bosses, items, they also include 5 unique episodes that you can play to know a little more about certain characters from the story. And you know these episodes are good when so many people have praised them online, especially episode 5. One of my favorite episodes in my opinion, but I don't want to cry, so we're moving on. Since this is the spoiler-free section of the video, I'll try to be as brief as I can while not saying anything too revealing. At the start of the game, you get a cutscene that shows a dialogue exchange between what seems to be 2 individuals, one whose dialogue is shown and the other who doesn't say anything. This dialogue is sort of a prelude to the events that are going to happen within the story, despite there being no visuals except for the dialogue itself. The 2 end up getting separated by some unknown force, and the scene changes to a Pokemon on a beach losing consciousness after temporarily waking up for a bit. We then cut to another Pokemon who seems to be waiting outside of a camp, building up courage to step inside. But they end up chickening out, and after staring at one of the best visuals in the entire game, wake up the unconscious Pokemon on the beach. The Pokemon says its name and learns that it has been turned into a Pokemon, even though it claims that it's actually a human. Suddenly, a Coughing and a Zubat come up to the Pokemon you just met and steal an item from them. They run off to a nearby cave, and the pair team up in order to get that item back. Alright, so from this point on, I'm going to be referring to the first Pokemon that you saw in the beginning as the protagonist, or you, since you play as them for the majority of the game, and the Pokemon you met on the beach as your partner. This just makes things easier for me to establish who's who, and easier for you to know who the heck I'm talking about. You and your partner venture into the cave and fight the Coughing and Zubat in order to get your partner's item back. You wind up victorious, and the 2 of you end up forming a team because of the bond you just formed. After a brief title card, the scene then cuts to you and your partner in front of the same camp from before, although this time it's established as Wigglytuff's guild. Since your partner has you with them, they don't need to be afraid like last time and build up the courage to step up to the entrance. Once you're granted access, you're introduced to Chatot, who is the guildmaster's assistant and friend. And given the name of the guild itself, I'm sure you can guess who it belongs to. Anyways, you and your partner meet the guildmaster and form a rescue team. Once you get a starter kit for becoming a rescue team, you're given a bedroom to sleep in so that you can start training in the morning and progress further in the game from there. That was essentially a brief summary to the beginning of the game, which I guess can be identified as the introduction. That's pretty much all I can give without going into further detail, and potentially spoiling major details about the plot and such. This summary may not be the best way of explaining the storyline, but this is the spoiler-free section of the video for a reason. The introduction is more of a way to establish the characters, setting an overall tone of the game. It gives some of the basic gameplay mechanics, while also not exposing too much about the game itself. The dungeon that you go through would more closely resemble a tutorial, rather than being the first dungeon. I wouldn't say that this is the point of the game where the player can decide whether to continue playing or not based on the story or gameplay itself, but more on whether the player would want to play this type of game. All of the Mystery Dungeon games are considered as dungeon crawlers, which should be obvious given the name, and although not the most popular genre out there, it's definitely an interesting genre nonetheless. The game revolves around randomly generated dungeons that spawn all around the Pokemon world, and there are rescue teams that consist of at least 2 Pokemon who explore these dungeons to do at least one of 3 things: rescue Pokemon that are in danger, collect treasures that await inside, or challenge the Pokemon that lurk within. There is a 4th option that rescue teams can do, such as yours, but it's pretty optional and it's not as important. that option doesn't get explored until later in the game. A lot of the time these options apply to your rescue team as well, since these are the main incentives to explore the dungeons in the first place. And while that may seem boring, you would be absolutely wrong. There are dungeons with secret rooms in it, some small, while some have literal treasure rooms in it. There are dungeons with secret bosses, dungeons that become harder as you progress through it, dungeons that change certain mechanics of the gameplay, dungeons that literally want to kill you. There are dungeons that actually fuck your mom. Sorry, I overreacted there. I guess you can say that my behavior was a bit of a mystery there. Get it? Because it's the title of the game. It's supposed to be a play on words, and I found it pretty funny. Before I move on to the spoiler section of the video, I want to say a few things about the game that I feel personally. Explorers of Sky, despite being one of my favorite games of all time, has its flaws too. I can praise it all day if I wanted to, but that goes without saying how it's not the most perfect game out there. For example, the randomly generated aspect part is what makes the game unique, but it's also what makes the game extremely infuriating at times. So this goes for features such as the dungeon floor layouts, item spawns, what type of Pokemon spawns, how many items or Pokemon spawn on a certain floor, and so on and so on. There were multiple times where I got really annoyed by RNG basically screwing me over, and I had to take a break from the game. Not to mention, certain Pokemon that spawn in dungeons can be a real pain in the ass. That picture that I showed on the screen before when I was screaming like an idiot about dungeons? Yeah, this one? That would probably be the most accurate picture that shows which Pokemon are the biggest annoyances when it comes to exploring a dungeon. And I can go on and on about what bothers me in the game, but I'm not going to. I only wanted to point out that no matter how much I love this game, it has its flaws, and I'm willing to accept that. And whether you take my opinions to heart is up to you. After all, this video is not explaining why Pokémon Mystery Dungeon is a perfect game, but why I love it so much. Which is also why I wanted to add this portion to the video. So with that being said, let's move on to the spoiler section. Alright, so I already provided a time code and a warning for this section, so if you still don't want to know any spoilers and are still here, I can only assume that you left the video running in the background or fell asleep watching YouTube, so this is basically your final warning. 3, 2, 1. Once you get settled into the guild, you get assigned your first mission and head out to a mystery dungeon for the first time. The tutorial one doesn't really count, and I already explained why. You complete that mission, get rewarded a large amount, and realize that the guild is a large scam. The next day, you meet God, get shown around the guild in the town, and get introduced to a new ability called the Dimensional Screen. This ability allows you to get glimpses into the future, although you don't really possess a way to control it. You get assigned another mission, complete that mission, get scammed by the guild again, and head to sleep to prepare for tomorrow. But before you fall asleep, your partner talks to you about important relics called time gears. Time gears are important pieces of the Pokemon world that essentially keep the time flowing in a certain area. If one is removed from any area, time effectively stops in that place, freezing all life including Pokemon. Your partner describes how these gears work in great detail. I'll let the scene play out. As you just saw, this scene introduces us to time gears, and what purpose they serve in the Pokemon world. And as you may have seen, there was a mysterious Pokemon that seems to have stolen a time gear as your partner was just talking about them. Don't worry about this character yet though, they'll be introduced pretty soon. Soon after, you do a couple more jobs, get taught how to be a sentry post, and then it's revealed that time has stopped in a place called the Tree Shroud Forest. And as you can probably guess, it's kinda obvious what happened. It's pretty much brushed over though, since you're just told to continue normally. However, this is when you're assigned your very first mission as an exploration team. You're told to explore a nearby waterfall to see if there's a secret that lies inside. And as it turns out, there is a secret cave behind it. You explore it, find a pretty nice gem, and discover that it's a trap, then get transported to the hot springs. Okay, so I'm gonna speed up the synopsis a bit here, since the story is pretty long, like really long. There's almost like 6 hours worth of cutscenes from the game, and it doesn't actually include gameplay from the player themselves. So you could only imagine how long this video would be if I covered literally everything from the game. You got that? Alright, let's continue. Right after your mission, the guild sets out on an expedition to discover the secret behind Fogbound Lake, only to discover that another amazing visual lies there. It's a really beautiful scene with all the bright colors, the flow of the water, the Volby and Illumies flying by. It's definitely a sight to see. Oh, and there's also a time gear, but that doesn't really matter. You meet a famous explorer named Dustnor. Remember him for later. You get notified that another time gear got stolen, and see that the mysterious Pokemon from before is in the process of taking the Fogbound time gear. After you finish a quick side mission, you and your partner decide to tell Dustnor about how you two met, and something interesting happens. When you tell Dustnor your name, he cracks a slight smile, and then changes expression to cover that up. This is really suspicious considering that Dustnor shouldn't know who you are and how you ended up in this world. But this one scene sets up some foreshadowing for a major event later in the story. I'll let you guess what that foreshadowing leads to. See if your guesses are correct when we get to that part. It's revealed immediately after that the time gear at Fogbound Lake was stolen, and the mysterious figure who's been taking him all this time is finally revealed to be Grovyle. And not just any Grovyle, the Grovyle. Why is he so special, you may ask? Well, you're gonna have to play the game to find out. Look, I can only tell so much of the story before you essentially lose the incentive to ever play the game. I get that this is the spoiler section and all, but I really encourage that you play the game instead. There is so much more story to the game, including a post-game which is arguably just as good as the main story. It would be a huge crime to essentially spoil the plot to the entire game and not have you experience it for yourself. I wouldn't consider myself a true fan if I let that happen. And besides, if I kept going, I would have explained how Dustnor is really a bad guy and that he betrays you when you least expect it. Oh, I wasn't supposed to say that. Whoops. If you couldn't tell already, I am very passionate about this game. It's among my top 3 favorite games of all time, and this wasn't even my first Mystery Dungeon game that I've played. I actually played Blue Rescue Team first, which is the first Mystery Dungeon game to release in the series. To be honest, I liked the game considering that the story in that game was also pretty good, but it also has its fair share of flaws, and I remember losing pace pretty fast. I would strongly suggest that you check out these games when you get the chance. It's pretty long, but I would say that it's definitely worth the time to put into it. I wouldn't want you to miss out on such a fantastic masterpiece. And whether it be one of the Explorers games or all of them, it's a game that you should definitely check out when you get the chance. Now, before I finish off the video, I want to add some final words about the game and my overall opinion on it. It's mostly for those who skip this section, but it could be for everyone too. Anyways, on to the conclusion of the video. Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky is a phenomenal game that has had a huge impact on my life. It's such an influential game that has allowed me to have a different take on storytelling, and despite its age as a game, it still feels fantastic to play. The emotional scenes still hit hard even though I've played through the entirety of the game multiple times. and the overall story doesn't feel old or repetitive whenever I choose to pick up the game. I honestly can't express how much I love this game, and it would be impossible to hate on it for the flaws it presents. The gameplay, the characters, story, soundtrack, all of it. And don't even get me started on the soundtrack. All of the music in this video is from the Explorer series, and they are really good. Hold on, let me actually play some songs that I think are good choices to listen to. Dialga's Fight to the Finish. Amp Plains. Deep Star Cave. Brine Cave. Through the Sea of Time. Don't Ever Forget. Memories Returned. Craggy Coast. Blizzard Island. The list goes on and on. If you don't plan on playing the game anytime soon, I would highly recommend just listening to the soundtrack. I bet you'll like at least one song out of the various choices that are available to you. I would have to argue that this soundtrack is what really characterizes the game, since it's what really adds element to the story itself. Most of the scenes wouldn't be the same without the music. But regardless, I would 100% recommend this game to anyone who is interested. This game deserves a 10 out of 10 100 times over. fuck IGN's rating, since their reasoning doesn't make any sense considering that they gave other remakes better ratings for minimal changes. Anyways, please play this game when you have the chance. I really don't think you'll regret it, and I would really love to discuss this game with more people. If you also enjoy Pokémon Mystery Dungeon just as much as I do, let me know down in the comments. I read all the comments and I would love to interact with more members of this community. And if you're interested in seeing more Mystery Dungeon videos, I'll put some videos on the screen that you can check out. They're great videos and I would highly recommend watching them if you want someone else's opinion on the game other than mine. I wasn't told to include these links in the video either, I just feel like these videos are great to watch if you're interested in the Mystery Dungeon series. So if you do want to check them out, their links will be in the description. All promotions aside, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.